Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Scavengers Reign episodes 5 and 6. They are called the Demeter and the Fall, respectively. Spoilers for the episodes, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you to Alison for picking this show. So, some big stuff happened over these two episodes. In particular, episode 6, we had the seemingly death of a major character. In fact, kind of two deaths, honestly. I mean, Sam's pretty much on his deathbed at the end of the episode as well, but I was thinking mainly of Levi, which is a genuine surprise, actually, that Levi seemingly has died this early into the show. I think the robot's an easy character to latch on to, and there's like an innocence to a character like this, where them discovering their humanity and only just starting to feel alive. And I think that one of the things they've done really well over the course of the 6 episodes so far is gradually build up Azzy's kind of respect of Levi's newfound humanity. Over these 2 episodes especially, there's little moments where Levi will say, "Oh, maybe I can join you for a swim next time," and Ozzy's like, "Yeah, that'd be nice." And then in episode 6, when she catches Levi singing, she says, "You're kind of the first robot who might have ever done that. You've just made a song." Although it might not be made a song, it might be more something that came from Fiona, who programmed Levi, but regardless, there's these little moments of bonding, there's these little moments of clearly Ozzy caring about Levi. So the big moment that comes in episode 6 really hits hard when Levi just kind of is pulled apart into 1,000 pieces. And of course, what does that is even more exciting and feels like a big deal. In episode 6, as soon as you realize that Levi and Azzy are going to cross paths with the creature that Cayman is working for, and Cayman's inside the creature at this point. He's like sleeping like a baby inside the belly of the beast. Literally. Pretty much. As soon as you realize they're about to cross paths, that gets quite exciting, because this is the first time that any of our 3 main threads that we're following, or 3 pairs of characters, or single character in Cayman's case, but like, this is the first time that they're somewhat interacting in some way. So holding that off until episode 6, which, you know, it's out of 12 episodes, so we're basically, you know, I mean, at the end of episode 6, we're halfway through the show now. And holding that off until episode 6, I think, was a wise choice. I think, you know, the implications that maybe Ozzy had feelings for Fiona as well as fleshing out Cayman and Fiona's relationship, I think adds a lot of weight to when they're going to interact. And I think I need to talk about Cayman's episode 5 stuff here, because the other exciting part of this is episode 5, his whole plot, is actually the interaction with a new character who doesn't make it out of the episode, but there's a character who wakes up on the Demeter, and like, this is actually quite an extended sequence at the start of episode 5, where he sees like a creature try to break into his cryopod. He sees someone else's cryopod already broken open and the intestines are hanging out. Clearly he's going to be eaten if he doesn't try and get away, and he's able to, but like every single thing he encounters as he falls out the ship and tries to run away, the vines on the outside try and crush him and eat him. Then there's these mosquito things. There's like a face hugger jellyfish thing that comes out of the water. Like, everything tries to attack or kill him, just one after the other. And then he falls in front of feet, and it turns out to be Cayman. It's a great little opening cliffhanger for the episode, actually, because immediately I got excited, because I thought, wait, Cayman's whole thing up until this point is that he is killing bigger and bigger things to feed his master, his, you know, alien monster that he's kind of like betrothed to, or whatever you want to call it. So I got excited. Is episode 5 going to be this story of him choosing to kill a human being for the sake of his monster? And what does that mean for him as an antagonist for the rest of the survivors throughout the course of the story? Or alternatively, is he going to realize that he's maybe helping do that, and maybe have the start of a redemption as he realizes he can't sacrifice a human that he has to try and help? And it's kind of in the middle, actually, where he doesn't necessarily actively help. It kind of feels like he's leading this character to the monster, but ultimately, when the monster does show up, and the monster's much bigger now, the monster's been getting fat off of all these things that it's been eating with Cayman's help. And when they do find the monster, Cayman does show concern that this other human being is being killed by the monster. And obviously the way it's even done is quite dark, because the monster's aware that Cayman might give a shit about this, and intentionally kind of, like, again, messes with his mind. There's a lot more flashbacks to Cayman's story in episode 5. We actually see a few flashbacks in episode 5 of when they're evacuating the ship, and Sam tells him, no, he goes last in the safety pods and all that. We see Ozzy looking at Fiona's cryopod and little moments like that, which are really good. But we also see that Cayman and Fiona had like another night of passion sometime after the breakup, and maybe they were going to rekindle. Maybe he was doing better, but it kind of disintegrates quite quickly, and like his call to duty kind of upsets her again, because she always, she's never the priority, is what she brings up. And she gave up her entire life to come on this journey with him, and he always treats her like she's the second most important thing. So it kind of fleshes some of these things out, but it always feels like the monster's evoking these flashbacks in him to help control him, to help say, hey, these humans abandoned you, these humans aren't worth you being loyal to. It definitely feels manipulative, and this monster's felt manipulative since episode 1, so that all kind of plays out. And one of the big things, now, whether or not the monster does this intentionally, or it's just something that Cayman sees in his mind as a representation of what's happening now, but when the monster snaps the neck telepathically of this guy, and the neck does like a full Exorcist 180, the head turns into Fiona's head, and that's what he sees. And I think it's a really cool little visual moment, because I think you can read it maybe a couple of ways, but generally speaking, the way I was coming out of this scene is that Cayman's watching this and realizing that, one, Fiona might still be alive on the Demeter. She might not be dead, right? We don't actually know if she is or not, I don't think, at this point. But secondly, this idea that this monster he is helping will kill her if the time ever comes. And in a sense, like, she represents the rest of the ship, like everyone else. She's the one that he really cares about, of course, but this idea that this monster isn't just something that's, like, confined to just killing other aliens on this planet. It's going to, like, ruin everything he cares about, or potentially cares about. And I think Cayman's kind of at this weird crossroads in his mind where he realizes that by helping this monster, he's just going to further bring doom to everyone else, when he already brought the doom of coming here in the first place. It was his fault, something that Sam now openly talks about, which obviously he and Ursula have talked about this before off scene, right? Because it's not like a new bit of information to them. But it was notable that in this episode, because we'd revealed it previously in episode 4 that it was Cayman's fault definitively, now they're saying it out loud, and like for the sake of the audience, it was being withheld so that we could see it in the flashbacks play out, and it could be a reveal for us. So yeah, I thought this was a pretty good moment. I was going to say maybe the best opening episode 5, but I actually think there's a moment with Ozzy and Levi that I might like just a little bit more, because it's kind of beautiful. But it's a really cool little moment that kind of represents him, like, Cayman realizing what he's working with and how dangerous this thing is, and that this thing might end up being like the end of everyone he knows if it, like, finds the other humans at the ship, and he is in this crossroads. So it feels like it is building up to whatever's going to stop this monster eventually. Like, for redemption purposes, it feels like it has to be Cayman finally fighting back in some way, because he's too powerless to do so now, or he's too weak to do so, and that could be a big moment. And it feels like he can't survive. I feel like Cayman's redemption at this point has to be sacrificing himself to save whoever's left, and that anything else will feel not good enough as far as redeeming him goes, just because he has messed up that much, it seems like. So big moment, but because of that, because we spent episode 5 with all of Cayman's plot doing that stuff, and setting up that this alien, this monster, is going to kill the other humans that it encounters, and has no interest in being nice to any other humans. It just wants its own puppet, which is Cayman. As soon as Ozzy and Levi are clearly going to interconnect with this monster and cross paths with it, as soon as that becomes a reality and a possibility, you immediately start thinking about how this is a big deal. Because we introduced a new character in episode 5 that could be killed off by the end of the episode, and it establishes the threat of this monster. It establishes, okay, this is how bad it can get, this is what it can do. But of course, you wouldn't necessarily do that to a main character. But because you've established that as soon as some main characters are going to interact with it in episode 6, being Levi and Ozzy, you're like, oh shit, you understand the danger they're in. You understand how big a deal this is. Not just because they might realize that Cayman's involved and how big deal that is. And that's a big deal before you even get to the possible personal connection between Fiona in the middle of them. But the fact that it still builds up to a death is actually quite surprising, because it almost, like, I don't want to say it's like playing the metagame in a weird way, but because it gives you a red shirt to kill off in episode 5, it's like, okay, that establishes the threat so that we can feel the stakes and the menace when it's going after main characters in the next episode, but we don't have to actually then kill off a main character to sell the threat. The fact that it does kill Levi by the end of the episode just rips her apart into a thousand pieces, which is a really beautiful and horrific moment, and the tear in Ozzy's eye, because Ozzy does genuinely care about Levi now and has been talking to Levi like more of a human over the course of the last couple episodes. It really hits hard, and Levi trying to kill this monster and basically seeing that it's helpless, a helpless task to do so, but does cut open to see Cayman for a moment and understands that Cayman's in there. But ultimately she almost gets killed and just barely survives, because they were crossing this big ravine kind of thing, and there's like a cable, and she ends up dangling off of that and falling to the ground and whatnot. But there's the tease at the end, of course, that when she picks up a part of Levi that's like a little transponder, her message is being read by someone in space. We don't know who. That's the little tease at the end of the episode, but that's a fun little thing to do. And just to go back to like their episode 5 stuff, which wasn't particularly important other than just building that relationship between them, but it did lead to what I thought was maybe the most beautiful moment in episode 5, which is all those things that were kind of sucking on Ozzy's skin back in episode 4 have left like rashes, and they're kind of getting worse. They're becoming inflamed, and they don't know what to do about it. But she ends up accidentally putting her hand in this little I don't know, a little pond, I guess I'll call it. It's like these like big sort of upside down mushrooms that have water in them. And she kind of puts her hand in, and these little fish come up and seemingly eat off this rash, and her hand's fine. And she's like, hey, this is like a natural remedy for this. These creatures do this. They fix this. So she finds a bigger one of these big upside down mushrooms and climbs up and goes in. And there's a great moment as like there's these like smoke bellows up at the top of it that kind of just puff something out. When they bellow, all these little insects carrying water, or I say insects, these little like flying creatures carry water, all come fluttering out, and the music gets quite beautiful. It's just there's a very serene quality to it. And ultimately, Ozzy has to like give herself over to the planet to maybe fix herself. So she basically just goes in for like a little like a hot tub session and lets all these fish come up and like suck all the rash like material off her, like all this like stuff that's growing out of her, and it completely cures her. And there's this great visual looking down where you just see like the shadows in the water of all these fish surrounding her, and it's very tranquil. It very much sets up that as much as parts of this planet are super dangerous, and this episode 5 in particular, showed that with the new character trying to escape the ship and just being completely like annihilated with everything that comes towards him. And then everything obviously in the Ursula and Sam plot is also pretty dangerous right now. But it also says that there is kind of other parts to this planet that are more beautiful, and this idea that if you give yourself over to the right part of the ecosystem, it will take care of you as well. Which is, an interesting kind of I kind of like that moment quite a bit. So yeah, big stuff for Ozzy and Levi over the course of this 2 episodes, especially episode 6. I think the demise of Levi really hit hard. I'm not surprised that the robot ended up dying, but I'm surprised that it happened in episode 6. And I think the fact that the monster that's controlling Cayman did this after being more menacing with each passing episode, the fact that it's now killed maybe the most sympathetic character of all the main cast is kind of a big deal, and kind of really sets up like the audience to hate this thing and really want the crew to somehow deal with it and win, or we want Cayman to find these pair of balls and actually fight back, something, whatever it is. But I think it makes you really long for a resolution there, so that's really cool. The other big thing, of course, throughout these 2 episodes is the Ursula and Sam side of things. Now, Episode 5, there's a lot of setup for what ends up happening in episode 6. So episode 5, they're kind of like the second or third plot in that, right? They're not the most important thing going on, but it just sets up a couple of little things. That there's these like pod-like plants that have got like little tentacles, and you know, some of them almost get Ursula early on, but later on, one of them does manage to grab Sam, but they don't grab him. That's a poor choice of words. I thought they were going to grab him. Instead, they just kind of give him a little prick, right? They sort of like jab him like a sting, like a bee sting. But you see that the little bit of blood that it took, it keeps, and it sort of goes back to this pod. And immediately my mind just jumped to, oh, it's going to make a copy. They're going to clone Sam. Like, whatever this is, it's going to be cloning them. And he feels a little bit weird about it, like a little bit sick because of the jab, but he doesn't know this is happening. Neither of them do. So that's basically it for episode 5, for the most part. Other than just the sort of the menacing idea of, you know, it's very ominous in what's to come. And there's a little bit of talk of like, oh, you know, Ursula, you have to be able to do some of this stuff without me in case something happens. Here's what you have to do if you get back to the ship. That kind of spreads out between the 2 episodes. But the opening of episode 6, I think, does a really good job of, like, again, setting up what to expect from this plot. In the same way that all of episode 5 really got you excited for the monster to interact with other main characters and really sold the danger of that happening to make it feel big. Episode 6's opening for the Sam and Ursula plot, where it just shows you this process on an animal that's separate from them, right? It shows you this herd of creatures. One gets jabbed by the plant that's duplicating things, and we see it get sick and keel over and effectively die. But we also see the clone be born and come out, find the herd, and then when the clone finds the herd, it basically explodes, and the matter that explodes from it, like, we'll call it acid for lack of a better term, although there's probably a better name for it. It covers all of the herd and kills all of them. And it's like super dark, and you realize, wait, this clone of Sam is a ticking time bomb, effectively. So you're very worried suddenly for Ursula. You're worried about what's going to happen. But because obviously it's a human and not just like a boar, and it wasn't, you know, it's an alien boar. I'm picking the closest thing I can think of. It's like, okay, but will it take longer? Does Sam have more of a chance of fighting the infection for longer or whatever? And that's effectively what happens. We get like a horror movie story almost, where once he starts to collapse and they have to make camp for the night to try and give him a chance to rest, we start seeing this kind of altered alien, craggy looking version of Sam, and Ursula sees him in the distance at one point and thinks it's just Sam, and it gets kind of eerie. I was a little bit surprised that it was completely wrapped up by the end of the story, but the entire big set piece, which does wrap it up, where this clone like walks through the fire and the tent's on fire, and she like sprays something flammable at him. It's like a bug mist that she's got on the planet. Because I've not really talked about it the last couple episodes, but they're still doing that thing where they're using a lot of natural resources on this planet. For example, in this episode, they've got these little rocks that light up, and all they have to do is kind of like, you know, knock on them a bit, and it'll just naturally illuminate, and that's kind of cool. But this same kind of thing, she kind of spits this flammable thing at him when there's fire there, and the clone is burning alive, and you get an almost Terminator-esque looking thing where it's walking around on fire, and as it goes down, you can kind of see the flesh go away, and the skeleton is just there. It's definitely a much darker image for an animated show than you're probably used to, I would say, unless you watch a lot of adult animated shows. But I don't, right? Animated stuff in my mind, like, for the most part, is stuff that is made at least suitable for children, if not for children. So this is like, oh, this is kind of a weird thing to have in an animated show for me, but I wasn't against it. It was cool. So it felt like a big deal. It felt like Ursula really had to fight for her life, because at this point, Sam's too weak to even help. And their end of their story is they find like a big tombstone, like a big it looks like a big rock snowman, but it says the name John on it, and she's like, this has been here for a long time. Like, someone must have been here. And sure enough, at the end of the story here, we see some old person come out of the forest. So we've set someone else up for Ursula to meet. But Sam, basically talks about how this is the end of his road, and like she has to be able to do this on her own now. And she's scared, of course. He gives her his ID badge and things like that, stuff that she can use to access stuff on the ship. But yeah, it's all very. I think this plot is really like episode 6 might be the best episode of the show so far, because I think it basically is just two plots and they're both really good. Right, one's like a horror movie plot of like an evil clone hunting two of the characters in the forest, and then like the almost Terminator-esque fire scene that happens that wraps that up. And then the other plot is Levi and Ozzy crossing the ravine and the monster attacks them, but there's so much weight to that because of all the pre-established stuff that's been set up with them. And this idea that the Cayman's inside the monster, like basically seeing Fiona beg for help. Because I don't think this moment's real, but like he keeps seeing in the memory inside the monster that as he was in the escape pod, Fiona was at the door banging on the window saying, "Hey, let me in, save me." I don't think that's real. I think she's in a cryopod because I think we saw Ozzy see her. So I think that's the monster trying to guilt him. I think that's the monster trying to, or if maybe not, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe this is his conscience trying to provoke him into action and say, "Hey, this is all about saving her. This is everything you could do to help these other humans will help save her." You could read it that way as well, I suppose. But despite all the darkness, despite the fact that two of the main characters effectively are dead by the end of this episode, there's kind of a really sweet moment at the end where it cuts to like where a lot of other things have died, and we see like this flower grow out that's really kind of pretty out of the monster that, or the animal that died at the start of the episode from the clone thing. We see like the flower spout through that. We see a flower sprout in a couple other places where aliens have died, where people have died. And notably though, the thing that made it feel really sweet to me is there's one where Levi landed out on the bottom of the ravine next to where all their stuff fell down. And I thought that was really sweet because it was almost like the planet recognized Levi as being alive, despite the fact that Levi had no biological material, right? I mean, arguably maybe she did have some because of that stuff that was like growing inside her that the planet had attached to her. Maybe that's what's caused this. But even that still adds to this idea that the planet recognizes Levi as alive before maybe the humans even did. So even Levi still gets this kind of post-mortem like blossom of a new life and a new flower in the place of her death. I thought the fact that Levi gets that as well as all the organic life, I thought was a really cool little beat. So yeah, we end up with a bunch of little cliffhangers here. Ursula's run into this person who's been here for a while before the Demeter. So who's that? I guess we'll find out. Someone hears Ozzy's message, and Ozzy is like at breaking point now and alone and sounds it, and she sounds depressed. So that's pretty big. And then we'll see what happens with Cayman inside the monster. So yeah, it feels like a big turning point here in the middle of the story. But I can't deny that it felt like a mid-season finale in a lot of ways. Not that it was aired like that, not like there was a gap after this episode, I don't believe. But it does feel like they've paced and structured this to give you this big sort of mid-climax in the middle to freshen things up and start to kind of pay off things a little bit. So I'm a little impressed, I have to say. I think the way it's handled some of the things that have grown over the past few episodes have definitely helped the show, and I do think it's typically getting better as it goes. All right, and I'm sure there'll be the odd little blip there. You can't necessarily have every episode be better than the last. That almost never happens that perfectly. But generally speaking, it feels like it's getting better as it goes, and I do think episode 6 is the most emotionally like impactful episode and feels like it hits the hardest out of all of them. So I'm looking forward to doing more episodes next month. So let me know what you thought of these two episodes in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep everything coming. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?